Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Strife, Legacy of the Eternals from Vision 3 Games. This is a two-player head-to-head match. Players take control of a group of champions, like fantasy-themed champions, like a Necromancer, and a Paladin, and a Ranger, and you are going head-to-head to try to take control of different locations, just trying to get points. You're going to play these champions. They all have different special abilities. The gimmick is that when you've played one champion, it goes into a separate pile and becomes a legacy champion, giving you a completely different ability. Let me go ahead and show you a brief look at how the game is played. Then we're going to come back and I'll let you know what I think. Alright, just a quick rundown of Strife, Legacy of the Eternals. This is a competitive game for two players. Each player takes control of a team of fantasy-themed champions who are vying for control of different locations out here and trying to get points. The goal of the game is to have the most points at the end of 3 rounds of play. Every location has points printed on the card. That's what you're vying for. If you can take control of these locations, they'll go into the discard pile. You'll get the points. This uses what I like to call the Sushi Go scoring system of 2 cards used to flip back and forth to determine the tens place of where your score is. Every time that you take a location, it'll go into the discard pile. The round is going to end when each player has 1 champion left in their hand. Then you're going to recycle all the different location cards, reshuffle the cards, put 3 more locations out, and start all over again. Now, each player has the exact same hand of 10 champion cards. They do exactly the same thing. They have exactly the same art. This is a deterministic game. You are trying to outwit and outthink your opponent. So let me run down what the cards are just really briefly, if I can. You have the 0 card, which is the Monk. Now, every card has a battle ability and a legacy ability. When a card is placed face down next to a location and then flipped over, its battle ability takes effect. When you get done playing that character, it's going to go over into your legacy pile, which is a face-up pile of the spent champions you've already used. And then on the next turn, its legacy ability is going to come into play. If at the start of the game, you're each actually going to play both a legacy and a champion down to the starting spot, and then you'll flip over the legacy champion just to determine who gets control of the, what I like to call the tie die. Isn't that funny? The tie die determines if you have the die, it starts off at 1. If you need to break a tie to determine the control of a location, you can give the die to the other player in order to break the tie. However, then you have to kick it up to the next number. And at the end of the game, whoever has control of the die is going to gain the number of points indicated on the die at that point. But in any event, whichever legacy champion you start off with is going to determine who. You'll look at their printed power, which in this case is 0, and that player is going to take control of the die. But that's the only time in the game that you do this. From then on, you're always going to keep your, at the end of a round, the character that's left in your hand, the champion that's left in your hand, is going to become your first legacy champion for the next round of play. And now I don't want to go through every single ability on all these cards, but for instance, the Monk's battle ability lets him copy the power of your opponent's champion if you use him for his battle ability, whereas his legacy ability says your opponent's battle champion may not activate their battle ability this turn. The Necromancer gains extra power equal to the champions you've already used when you play him as a battle champion. Let's see. The Assassin may exchange positions with your legacy champion, but if he's the legacy champion, you increase your battle champion's power by 6. A lot of the champions have to do with moving things around. So the Knights, in addition to having 8 power, which is the second highest in the game, the highest is the Barbarian. He gets calculated charge. You may move both players' battle champions to another face-up location, and you may place as a legacy, you may place the current location on the bottom of the location draw pile, and then advance the face-up location. The Barbarian, by the way, has an interesting legacy ability in that if you win the current combat, you get an additional 3 victory points if he's in your legacy pile. And there's a Wizard, a Paladin, a Ranger, a Druid, a Warrior. They all have different special abilities. So you'll have your legacy champion, and then on your turn, you'll go to whatever the farthest to the left location is. That's the current location you're vying for. Each player is going to put a card face down. You flip over, and you compare power. Whichever player... Well, first off, whoever has the highest power gets to activate their battle ability first. In this case, it's the Barbarian against the Ranger's 5. And you get to do your battle ability, unless you played the Monk. The Monk is the only thing that can override that, and it nixes out someone's battle ability. That happens first. Once you get done resolving those abilities, then you go to your Legacy Champions, which again are going to be based on the highest power. Now, some of the locations will actually influence the battle as well. So Paladin's Rock here says that you add 2 power to any warriors during combat here. Add 2 powers to any paladins, add 3 powers to any monks, and so on. There are also special locations you may choose to use that are purely optional. You don't have to play with them if you want, but they have little lightning bolts next to their victory point value. When you take these locations, in addition to the victory point value, you're also going to get to take the card and put it in front of you, and on your next turn, you must use the card, if at all. Like it says here, at the end of the combat phase, after combat has been resolved, you may double the victory point value of the current battlefield. So it's just like a one-time use ability you can get from taking that location. But normally what's going to happen is you'll determine who the winner is after using all of your abilities. You'll take the printed value and points on the card. These will come back down and become your Legacy Champion. The cards will cycle forward, and then you are going to do it all over again, choosing new champions and using new Legacy abilities. Now, the only other little wrench you can throw into the works is actually event cards. You can set up a few event cards, one event card at random for each round of play that will have an impact upon the game if you so desire. Again, this is another optional thing you can do if you want. So, for instance, you have Season of the Meek. All battle champions with a base power of 4 or less gain 2 power. Festival of the Sphinx. Before battle champions are revealed each turn, both players must guess their opponent's champion, and each correct guess earns 1 victory point. Ceremony of the Worm has too much text for me to read right now. Trade routes open. The Kingdom of Astaria and the Shadowkeep are worth an additional 2 victory points. Those are 2 particular locations. So that's really it. I mean, it's not a very complicated game. It's a rather simple game for 2 players of just trying to outwit your opponent and trying to maintain control of the tie die as much as you possibly can. Actually, I'm sorry, it does have a proper name. The proper name of the die is the Fate Stone. It's the Fate Stone. I'm sorry I kept calling it the tie die, but my name sounds better. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Component-wise, there's not much to the game, but it looks really good. I like the oversized cards. I like the artwork on the cards. It's really well done, and pretty much all of them, including the location cards. Those look really good, actually, even better than the champion cards, and the event cards as well, though those are an optional thing. But everything looks good. I like the graphic design. Everything is very clear-cut. The rules are very clearly written. It's not a hard game to understand. You'll have it up and running very quickly, and it's relatively quick. I think if you played the full 3-round game, you're looking at, if you know what you're doing, about a half hour. I think that's pretty reasonable for this. Maybe even less than that, depending on how AP prone you and your opponent are. But not too bad otherwise. As far as the gameplay goes, I'm kind of 2 minds about this. On the one hand, I really love the whole Legacy Champion mechanic and the Battle Champion mechanic. How every champion has 2 different special abilities, and where they are determines what ability you're getting from them. That whole process is just fascinating, and deciding how you cleverly play them in order to get an ability when it's going to help you most, and how you can combo those together. So, for instance, say, okay, I'm going to play my Knight champion here with the idea that it may not help me that much now. But when he becomes my Legacy Champion, his Legacy ability is going to be tremendously helpful when I try to take this next location, which is the one that I really want. The Knight's probably a bad example because that's the one that moves locations around, but you get the idea. And just using your cards like that in the best way possible is really, really interesting. And knowing when to play them, because some champions are better off played near the beginning of a round, and some are better off at the end of a round, but sometimes, depending on which ability you're trying to get, that can even flip. So I love that whole idea and how that plays out over the course of the game. The problem that I have with it is, first off, this is a very deterministic game. And I sometimes have issues with those. I like there to be a little bit more randomness and variety to how combats work, which essentially is what's happening here. You're doing a combat of a sort, but it's just purely deterministic. You know exactly what your opponent has because you have exactly what they have, and you can look at what they've played. Nothing here is really secret, so it's just a matter of trying to outthink your opponent. And I know that there are people who love that, and for that reason will love this game, but for me, it leads to there being just some very anticlimactic moments. It's just trying to guess what your opponent's going to play, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. Now, you have control over what you play and what you try to combo off of, but you can't really anticipate what your opponent's going to play until you start whittling down cards. And then it gets a little more interesting because it's like, okay, he's got 2 or 3 options here. He or she has 2 or 3 options here, and if she does this, then I should definitely play this. But what if she plays this? That is interesting, and it's tense, but it just, especially after you've played the game several times, which is eminently possible because, like I said, the game is pretty quick, it just starts to feel not as interesting. I think there's a few different things that could have been done, or maybe will be done with expansions in the future to make this better. First off, having more champions, maybe having enough champions for them to be randomized so that... Let me just say that I know that a lot of what I'm saying here is going to be like, you're missing the whole point of the game. It's not supposed to be random. I know, but for me and for people who maybe think like me, I'm just giving suggestions as to what I would have liked to have seen. A random deck of champions so that you're not entirely sure what your opponent has, or maybe you are entirely sure what your opponent has. You can show them everything that you have at the beginning, but at least it will be different in every game. I wish that the locations were more impactful. It's usually very clear which locations you really want because they have the most points. That's all that you're really concerned about. Yes, some of them have different special abilities, but they're not really that earth-shattering. It's like, oh, Rangers get 2 points. Okay, that's fine, and it might be very helpful for you, but it's nothing like that exciting. Even the, I think they're called remnant locations, which give you a lingering effect for your next turn, not that meaningful, and sometimes they just don't apply. I think the event cards were their effort to add a bit of randomness to the game and to spice things up a bit, but those are a mixed bag. Some of them are fine. I like the Sphinx that lets you do the guessing game, but again, that's just a guessing game. It's not that impactful. But there are some that are just aggravating. Like one in particular I'm thinking about, which cancels out players' abilities to flip around locations for the round, just makes like a large chunk of the abilities of the champions completely useless, and we could not wait to get past that round and be able to use those abilities again, because it was like, okay, I'm playing this champion and it does nothing because the ability doesn't apply now. So, and there's a couple of cards like that, so I think that was a bit problematic and it didn't come off. I know what they were going for with the event deck, it just didn't work quite as well. It probably sounds like I'm really hating on this game, and I don't mean to be, because it is super interesting. I love the way the champion mechanic and the legacy champion mechanic works. I love the artwork and the design, and there's something here that's like the kernel of a great game. It just needs to be spiced up a bit. Like the Fate Stone, even the Fate Stone is interesting because it's a tiebreaker and is kicking it back and forth and getting an escalating amount of points. I want to see more of that idea spread out and have more just interesting little bits like that. I don't know how else to say it, but still a solid game. I know that people are going to love this for some of the reasons I said I don't like it, and I hope that with the further expansions, maybe I'll come around and love the game like I'm sure a lot of other people will, but for now it's just okay for me. That is Strife Legacy of the Eternals from Vision 3 Games.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.